The real challenge is to get my personality and my image out in front of the joke, and then have it be that these jokes are what I'm choosing to talk about.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast. Rick Roberts here. And man, I had too much Halloween candy last night with two kids. And one kid doesn't eat chocolate, so that defaulted over to my plate. And then my littlest one doesn't like several types of candy, so I ended up falling on the grenade and taking one for the team, and I may have done too much. But nonetheless, I'm here today because we've got a podcast. It is the first. We released these on the 1st and 15th, and today I'm excited because I got to talk to Ross Bennett. And anybody who knows Ross Bennett may not know Ross Bennett completely. He's an interesting guy, and I got to pick his brain a little bit, find out more about him, and I'm glad I did. You're going to dig this podcast. He also teaches classes up in New York City when he's not traveling, the Manhattan Comedy Club. You can check all this out at rossbennett.com. That's rossbennett.com. He's a great dude, and we'll get to that in less than 30 seconds. I wanted to give a quick shout out to our Patreon supporter this time through. Welcome to Patreon's Club 52, Gina DiMaggio. Gina, glad to have you on board with the podcast, and looking forward to meeting you maybe in one of the Google Hangouts that we do, Zoom Hangout, I guess we call it now. But those will be coming up soon. We'll have one in November, and I'll make sure you get the invite. If you're interested in Club 52 or want to know more about it, just Google search Club 52 and School of Laughs. Learn all you can. All right. Other than that, thanks to Joel Byers and the Hot Breath Podcast for sponsoring. Let's get right into this one with Ross Bennett. I'll talk to you on the flip side. So Ross, thanks for taking time to jump on the call today. And we were talking a little bit offline before we started, but I'm curious, where and when did you find out that comedy might be a thing you wanted to pursue? Was it the high school years, like most of us?
I was very fortunate. I was able to find my thing. And in high school, I'm the slowest kid, the geekest kid, the last one to hit puberty. I'm a smart aleck, and I, have this tremendous need to be noticed or to be a star or whatever. But I get on the yearbook staff as a photographer, and that became my identity in high school, was being a photographer. Combining that with doing the announcements in the morning on the radio, on the announcing system in the school. And then after high school, I went to University of Florida and quickly got overwhelmed by that situation, enlisted in the Army, and ended up in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And when I was at Fort Knox, I had a company commander who recommended me for the West Point, the military academy at West Point.
Really?
And one thing led to another, and I spent a year at a prep school preparing for West Point. And I went to the academy in the summer of '75. And what happened was I went through the first year and a half, summer of '75 through the Christmas of '76. What went on? We're talking about Saturday Night Live and Steve Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, those two events were like the ringing of the bell for many of the guys in my generation, towards this, they were having so much fun.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We had watched like Robert Klein and Carlin and stuff on television, but all of a sudden there's these younger people and they're just having so much fun. And it's like, my gosh, I want to be a part of that. I mean, it's like they can do it. And then Freddie Prinze became, it's like, oh, here's this guy my age becomes the star, and then he dies.
Right.
He shoots himself. And I remember being at the academy and finding when that happened and saying to myself, if I don't do this, if I don't give this a shot, I'll always wonder.
Right.
I just had this sense that if I stayed at the academy, because I was at this point where I could leave and not have to go back out in the Army. But I only had about 6 months before I would owe them more time. And I said to myself, if I stay here, that's 2 years, and I'll owe the Army 5 years. And there's no way I'm not going to be married with kids after 7 more years. And I'll be like I told myself I'd be too old to do what I wanted to do.
Well, it's a good thing that you identified that.
So it took me, I tried to make jokes about it for years and years and years and years. I finally came up with one joke. I teach a writing class here in New York City. And my big thing is, you never know. Some of these jokes, they take a long time to gestate, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This one took 40 years. And the joke is, I left West Point to become a comedian, probably the greatest service I will have ever done for my country.
That's a solid joke. It's worth the wait.
And there's nothing I like better. I love it when you have a line that says something and is a strong line.
Right.
Okay. It's one of those things. It's like, like in musicals, in modern musicals, the whole thing was when your song also progressed the plot forward.
Right.
Well, when you can have a line in your act that progresses your story forward. And that's a big thing that I've done as a comic is I've felt that what I'm supposed to do on stage is reveal myself to people, tell them my story.
Right.
And in the course of doing that, I talk about life and I talk about things in the world and everything. But ultimately, I feel that I'm what I'm supposed to talk to them about.
Right. And that's, I know for new comics that are listening, that's sometimes, some of those new comics get that right away, but they don't know how to deliver that material. And so it doesn't get the response they want. They back away from it. When you first started, did it take you a while to get to that kind of autobiographical approach to the material, or were you more topical? Like most of us?
What happens is as you're creating stuff, and this is basically what I talk to my class about. You got to remember that what we do, we're a joke delivery system, okay? Our job is to tell jokes. And as long as you keep that in mind, you have a chance to be successful, okay? Now, what you tell jokes about sort of varies, all right? But as you're creating material, sometimes it's observational things about the world, and sometimes it's things about me. And we're taking them up on stage and we're trying them out, and the ones that work, they keep, and the ones that don't work, we let go of. George Miller, wonderful comic George Miller, he had this greatest thing he did. I can still remember seeing, I went out to LA in January of '79. And I went to Comedy Store to see what I was up against. I was 23 years old. And see what I had what I had in front of me that I had to get into this business. Okay.
Sure.
And George Miller goes up and he brought out a stack of 3x5 cards, and he started reading jokes off these 3x5 cards. And then he had this line. He goes, these are all new jokes, and what I do is if the joke works, I take the right corner here and I fold it down, and then I save that and I know to do it again later. And if it doesn't work, I take the left corner and I fold it down and I sell those to new comics.
That's great.
Isn't that funny? Oh, I love that.
That's hilarious. So yeah, when you go out there and you see, and you're looking for what's the dragons you got to slay to move up the chain, what other things jumped out at you as far as, I need to get better at this, or I need to overcome that? What things got on your radar with that trip out there?
Well, I was at 23. I had pretty much I did my best to become like a long-haired hippie freak,
Mm-hmm.
and let my hair grow out. And I had it in my mind, I didn't want to do anything like anybody else. And I had it in my mind that the real strength was in the laughs you get that were not associated with a joke. That's a real comic. Okay, that was, at least that's where I was at that particular time. And at that time, I was just going out and flying by the seat of my pants. I mean, I had routines and everything, but I would sometimes go out and have a horrible attitude and say things and alienate people with the thought that now if I can get them back by the end of this show, that's quite an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I made my life a lot harder than I had to, Rick. I'll tell you right now. When I think back, and I was out in LA at the Comedy Store when all these New York acts came out. These wonderful acts like Seinfeld and Mark Schiff and George Wallace and Richard Belzer, they came out. And Seinfeld's the one, I mean, such beautiful material. I remember just watching and it's like, wow. I mean, it was, don't take this the wrong, I mean, if Jerry's listening, I was telling myself it was soulless, okay, because it didn't connect to anything. It didn't seem to connect to anything. It was only there to be clever and to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that was enough. And he was just so wonderful at it. And I thought I had to fill everything I had with so much angst and everything. I always had some good lines in my act. I always had some good lines. But it really wasn't until I moved to New York about 2000 to sort of restart my career that I focused on my writing for the sake of writing.
And what steps did you take to kind of hone in on that? Did you take any classes yourself or get with a writers group of comics, or what helped you move that forward? I
was around people who were wonderful writers, and New York tends to really attract people who are trying to create great material. You know, LA is often about becoming a star, and New York is often about becoming a great comedian. Okay. And not that you can't do one and the other or whatever, but that seems to be the way it is. And everybody in the city was always working on material. Okay. You know, you look at, you go through the list, you go through, you know, down at the Cellar, Jim Norton and Colin Quinn, you know, people like that, they're always working on material. You know, Laurie Kilmartin always was working on material. Guys like Pete Coriel, always, Joe Matarese, always working. They're always working on new stuff. And so Bill Burr, always working on new material. And, it forced me to give it a shot, you know, to try and create this. You know, and the stars who would come into the clubs at that time, guys like Seinfeld or Chris Rock, they weren't coming in just to do their old act, to stroke themselves, okay?
Right.
They would be coming in because they had written material and they were preparing to do a set on Letterman, or they were preparing to host the Oscars or whatever. When they would stop in, I've always had so much respect for these guys, because when they would stop into a club and bump everybody, they weren't bumping them for their own ego. They were bumping them because they had work they had to do. They were creating something.
Right.
And I always had great respect for that.
And was it about that time when you moved to New York, or a little bit before that you'd started thinking about, you know, pursuing the David Letterman show and kind of getting your set together for that? I mean, it's the goal for every comic when you start, but when did you realize it was a potentially achievable goal?
I tried to get on the Tonight Show with Carson around 1982, 83, around there. Mm-hmm. And so I've been rejected from these shows for 30 years. Okay. Right. I remember when I auditioned for Jim McCauley, I remember his response was, I didn't see anything I thought was funny, and I definitely didn't see anything that Johnny would think was funny.
Oh, man.
And it was brutal. And with the smell of bourbon in the air, you know?
Right.
And but what I realize now in retrospect is these guys, see, I'm up on stage, we go up, a comic goes up, and all I hear are my laughs. And, you know, if you're a good comic, you're going to get the laughs. All right? That's not the thing. That, you know, that's why we do what we do. You know, you get to a certain point, you can go up and get the laughs. The question is, how do you get the laughs? What is it you're doing to get the laughs?
Right.
And so guys like Jim McCawley or Mitzi Shore or Bud Friedman and these different, you know, power people, they've seen 1,000 comedians. And so we might be doing stuff that's hack, but we don't know it's hack because we're getting the laughs. We think that's enough.
Right.
And that's why the guys who are these brilliant people like Stephen Wright, you know, they just pop. You know, they're just, it's so evident. You know, people like Roseanne Barr, when she walks into the Comedy Store, why it's just so evident that, you know, she's just this flower that's just ready to bloom in front of the country. Okay. So when I got out to New York, I'd always wanted to do it. I'd auditioned a few times, been told no a number of times. And I remember auditioning for Eddie Brill, asking him to look at me. He looked at me, and we were friends. I would play poker with him some. And he goes, I hate to tell you this. He goes, it always hurts to tell a friend this, but you're not right for the show. And, you know, it's a hard thing to hear because it's just so dismissive. You know, it's like, well, how can I be right? You know, it's like you want to give an argument, but it's like a girl who says she doesn't want to go out with you. If they don't want to go out with you, they don't want to go out with you.
Right.
You know, you can't make someone like you like that. And then it was tough because I was always working on my material in New York that I thought was right for TV. I was always working on that set. And because when I moved to New York, I had it in my mind of what a showcase set was. Okay, a lot of guys, I would see them. They would come to New York and they would do like 10 minutes out of the road act, and they would wonder why that didn't wow them. Mm-hmm. And I knew pretty much early on that you couldn't just do 10 minutes out of your road act. You got to put together a 10-minute set, you know. And that's what I did. And I worked on it for years. And people would say to me at the time, "You're perfect. You should be on Letterman. You're perfect, blah, 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 blah." And no, Eddie said no. Eddie said no. Well, one thing led to another. God bless Eddie Brill, but he got fired. Okay. And when Eddie got fired, they put this triumvirate of 3 fairly young people in charge of looking at comics. And this was around 2012. And they went out, and I was given the opportunity to audition for them. And when the opportunity came to me, I said no at first. And then I said yes, because I didn't want to be disappointed again. I couldn't handle it.
Right.
But then I went back and I said yes. And I had been working on this set, and I just went up and I knocked it out of the park. And then they said, "We want to see you again." And I went to another place with another group of comics, and a lot of them, were not big. I was seasoned, and I had some, smart, clever material. Right. And I knocked it out of the park again. And then we put together my set, and that took me to the end of the summer of like 2012. And I had to wait 6 months to get on the show. I was waiting for the call for 6 months. It was brutal. It was brutal. You would see, and you keep hoping that Dave's not going to die. Okay. That there's not going to be some sort of a horrible incident that happened.
Right.
And then I remember when they called me, they offered me 2 dates. It was so funny. And the first one, I was working a cruise. And the second one, I was free. And my instinct was, of course, I'll cancel the cruise and I'll take the first one. Uh-huh. And I knew that what I had to do was not be that eager. And I had to take the second date.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, for those next 2 weeks waiting for that, I was on pins and needles. You know, this guy had better not have a heart attack. Okay, stay
Right.
cool. You know, don't do a meltdown up there, buddy. You know, stay cool. You don't want this boat to sink. And then I got out there and I got to do it. And it was one of the. It was kind of that. It was definitely a bucket list for my career.
Absolutely. And when you had that 6-month countdown and then that final 2-week countdown to do the set, how much, you know, you've been working on it for years. How much did you do it just to keep it fresh, or how much did you not do it to keep it fresh leading up to that?
I went around the week before and allowed myself to stop in at all the clubs in the town and go up, you know, almost every night.
What's up, School of Laughs? This is Atlanta comedian Joel Byers and host of the weekly podcast Hot Breath, your weekly guide to comedy mastery. Every Monday, you can hear well-researched interviews with comedians like Bo Burnham, Aries Spears, Miss Pat, and Rick Roberts, revealing their tips and techniques for finding comedy success on and off the stage. Subscribe to Hot Breath on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or any other podcast platform to join the Hot Breathiverse and learn the top comedy tips from comedy's top comics. I hope to see you there. Hot Breath.
There's nothing like having an act. There's nothing like it in the world, you know? And because you got the stuff that you develop a relationship with this material. Some of the stuff you've done for, you know, decades, and some of it's fresh and new. You know, particularly when you're a guy like me, I'm not a star. And so I'm always up there doing my greatest hits.
Right.
All right. And nobody ever complains. And I work a few new things once in a while, but I'm up there doing my great. But these jokes all mean something to me. You know, I think about them when I do them and where they came from. I don't know. I love what I do. I still love what I do, Rick.
That's great. And I always tell people too, like, my act, it revolves around my family a whole lot. And obviously as comics, we travel. But when I'm talking about my family on stage, it kind of takes away a little bit of missing the family back at home, because I'm bringing them along with me. So I get excited when I get to my show.
I've got a joke I've made reference to with my son since I wrote it. And I wrote it when he was a baby, and he's now 33 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's about students against driving drunk. And when I started doing it, it was like, when he turns 17, we're going to sign this thing. And then when he was 17, we signed this thing.
Right.
And then after a year, and then as time went on and afterwards, I remember when my son was 17 and we signed this thing.
Right.
Okay. And it, every time I'm doing it, I just feel close to my son, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's funny too, as you know, you grow older or more experienced and the dates change on things. I'm always having to recalibrate how long ago my parents celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, when my anniversary is, how old my kids are. You know, so I'm trying to take all the math out of those jokes so that I can just say the joke and not have to think or be caught up in a math problem that doesn't make sense to the audience if they're following that close, you know? It's interesting how that works.
I still have a joke. And it's in the Students Against Drunk Driving bit, where I talk about calling my father up, and I'm still using a payphone.
But it probably makes it a little funnier. Do you call attention to the fact that you're doing it, or let the audience kind of take a second?
I used to, but I don't actually say payphone. You know, but I'm miming I'm miming a phone, you know, a landline.
Right.
And I haven't had a landline in this century, for heaven's sake.
Right.
And I do it, and I sort of laugh to myself, you know, but they give it to me.
That's funny. That's funny. What do you, when you hit the road now, you probably, I assume, do as much local as you can to not worry about traveling so much, but you do corporate events and fundraisers and all kinds of gigs around the country. What are what are some things that, as a more experienced comedian, you look forward to or don't look as much forward to when you hit the road to do gigs these days?
Well, I would say the big question mark, the thing is what is the venue and the space like?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what's the lighting and the sound like? All right. And you give them a rider and you try and make it clear to them what your needs are. And you try and make it clear to them that the things I'm talking about is not me being a prima donna. These are things that if you get them, the more you get this close to what I'm telling you to do, the better the show's going to be, the better the response is going to be, the better the laughs are going to be. And the further they are away from any sense of how a show should be produced, the less likely they are to follow those moments.
Right.
And it's sometimes you can overcome it, but that you're not, they're paying you good money and they know that they're not getting the response that they could get if they had just done it right.
Right.
And it's like 4 or 5 basic things. You want the room to basically be dark. You want a light on my face. You don't want overhead lighting. They think that that's enough. You want a sound system that they can clearly hear me. You want the audience fairly close to where you're standing. Okay. You don't want a big dance floor between you. And you want them to be somewhat compact together. And you want to be introduced by somebody who the audience knows, and they have to know you're going to be performing before you get up there.
Right.
They can't, they have to know there's going to be a comedian on the show. So that that's what they're expecting. And if you miss out on any of those things, it has a negative impact on the response.
Right. Yeah. I had a show a couple weeks ago in Arizona where I get there and I can see immediately like several of those components they didn't listen to. I talked to the guy 5 or 6 days ahead of time and he said, "Oh yeah, we got it all covered," and get there and none of those things are covered. Do you have any, because I have a hard time after the fact when I know it could have gone better. It went fine, but it could have gone a whole lot better. Confronting that person afterwards and saying, "Well, we kind of talked about this." Is there a way you address it afterwards, or just do as much as you can beforehand and then let it go?
I tend to address it before the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I tend to talk to them about it before. I said I needed this, and this, and it's you're shooting yourself in the foot here. You got to make sure that they have a clear rider, so at least it's spelled out, so you can say, "Look, I told you all these things."
Right.
My rider isn't about M&Ms and Mountain Dews in the dressing room. All right. My rider is about what makes the show what it can really be. Okay. And so if I'm going to address them about it, and I'll get there and I'll try and work it out. So I'm with them, but it's always challenging.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the downside. The upside is when you get to a place and they have it set up perfectly, and you can it's like T-ball. You can just knock it out of the park, Right. But the truth is, the reason they hire us is that we can at least make a show out of the worst situation. And that's really the proof of what of a pro like yourself is, that okay, I'm gonna make what do you call it? I'm making a silk purse out of a sow's ear,
Right.
There. How's that for a Kentucky phrase, huh?
Yeah, I'll work with that, and I'll barbecue that pig when you're done with it. We'll get him up.
Yeah, you bet.
I just want to ask you a question on your voice. Something I've always noticed when you perform is, and even here on the podcast, your attention to diction and enunciation is something I want to know how you got there with it. But also, do you think, I kind of know the answer, but how many comics don't pay attention to that and miss out on not only the clarity of their joke telling, but also the respect for the audience and giving them a great performance. Because I just noticed that you're always very good down to the pop on the P if you have it for a specific point in a joke. Was that something that came naturally, or were you in theater at some point? Somebody taught you that? Where did that evolve from?
I did study theater, and maybe it came from that. But once again, with my class, I tell them about this tonight, and every time is, I said at the very beginning that we're a joke delivery system. My job, here's how I tell my class what my job is. My job is to go through life and observe things that I think are funny, okay? And then I got to figure out a way to tell that to a group of people and to get them all to see what I saw that was funny and to get them to see it at the exact same moment so it can make a laugh and it pops, okay? Now, anything I do that gets in the way of basically, I'm a translator, is what I am. I mean, I'm trying to get you to see what it was that I saw. And I got this line I've always done for years about being, people think I look like I'm a teacher. And I've gotten that for years, and I have a joke about it. But as a comic, I look at that being the case. My job is to make sure they understand what I'm saying. Because if they don't understand what I'm saying, they don't have a chance to see what it was that I thought was funny.
Right. And when you deliver your material, I find if I slow down enough to where I'm hearing it as if I'm hearing it for the first time, that works best for the audience. Do you have any mental tricks like that as far as staying on the pace and not getting too quick?
Well, I've always had a hard time looking people in the eye. Okay. Because part of me still doesn't want to be up there until I get the laugh. Until I start getting laughs, I want out. Okay,
Right.
Once I start getting laughs, I'm okay. Okay, but I find if I look at the people while I'm delivering the material, and I try and make eye contact and see if they get what I'm saying, because you can tell if someone is absorbing what you're saying or not.
Mm-hmm. And
then sometimes I'm loose enough with my jokes that if I look at them and they don't seem to be absorbing it, I'll repeat a word. I'll repeat part of the setup. I want to make sure they get it. I started noticing myself doing that when you'd be telling a joke and somebody would drop something or somebody would cough or somebody would make a noise in the middle of it. And that it interrupted some people being able to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just fine again. And I found that it didn't make any difference. As long, they got to get you're building a building, and you got to put each piece in there, but so each floor is solid for them to get the next piece. So the only thing I remember about pace is I think it was Leno who said, I heard him say once about slow down, and if you think you're going too slow, you can still go a little slower.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think I heard that before.
And it's challenging because in order to do that, you have to realize that you are enough, okay? That you and your personality and your identity on stage is valid to occupy people's time, that it's worth occupying people's time. I don't have to, what I'll tell them, it's another image I put out to my class, is about getting in front of the joke. And sometimes when you're uncomfortable on stage, you speed your jokes up like you're hiding behind your jokes. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I just say this stuff, I don't got to look at you. I don't got to think about you. I can sort of hide behind my jokes. But the real challenge is to get my personality and my image out in front of the joke, and then have it be that these jokes are what I'm choosing to talk about. Here's another, Leno has always been like that, Hey, here's an idea, It
Right.
always seems like he's picking these things out of the air. And that's one of the wonderful things. He would have. I would watch him in L.A. At going up, whether it was 200 people or 5 people, made no difference. You couldn't tell any difference in him. He would get them all laughing, no matter how many were there, and it always seemed like he was just thinking of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Which is another one of the things we do. So imagine yourself being an archer. This is the image I love. You're an archer, and your jokes are the arrows, and they're in the quiver behind you. And you're standing there with your bow, and your jokes, you're reaching back and you're picking one out, and you're pulling it back and you're firing it. And how did that one go? That one went great. And then you're reaching back and get another one. Okay, you're choosing to tell each of these, and it makes it so I'm grounded on stage.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And sometimes if you don't get the laugh, you didn't have the target and the audience for that joke to hit. So it's all about choosing the right material at the same time. And that actually reminds. Somebody told me a while back that we're talking about opening jokes, because some people put a lot of pressure on opening jokes, but they had said that with an opening joke, if I just get the arrow on the board, on the target somewhere, I can get it. I'm not worried about a bullseye the very first line out of my mouth. And that to me was a visual that I could relate to. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I just got to connect with them, and I can zero in as we go, but I'm not going to get flustered if that first one doesn't hit the bullseye. You know what I mean?
It's funny, you get after a while, there's a half dozen different ways you can start a show. Mm-hmm. And at least for me. And sometimes it's with an A joke, if it's the perfect situation, and I can get all their focus and nail them from the very first line. And sometimes I know I have to settle them down a little bit. And so I'll just, do a little bit of, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. That kind of thing, looking around, waiting for them to gather their focus towards me. That happens a lot of times at like some of these senior communities or whatever I go to. And sometimes I'll do something topical up front, or something that just happened in the room, or make a comment about the person that introduced me. And you just sort of go by instinct. At least that's what I do. Mm-hmm. You get, so, that's what they don't realize is that you've delivered these, you've been up 10,000 times. So almost every experience, somewhere in your DNA, you know how to handle it.
Right.
So I have a lot of choices to make when I go up these days.
Yeah.
I'm doing the show, going out on tour starting this weekend. Make comedy great again. Have you heard about this?
No, I already like it.
It's funny, the title sounds political, but it's apolitical. No political jokes. It's all clean comedy. And like 4 comics, myself, David Earl Reed and Tina Giorgi and Jeff Allen.
Oh man!
And we're doing. We got 8 bookings. They're all theater shows in the Northeast, and the tickets are going well. It's all clean comedy, no politics, and we're all just out there, basically with baseball bats, just beating people over the head with our material, And it's basically for people who just who want to go out and be entertained, and they don't want to be hit over the head with politics.
Yeah, we've got enough of that going on already for sure. Well, that sounds exciting. I'm sure you're looking forward to that.
Man, so I'm like, I can't wait. First show is this Friday.
Oh man, I'll have to get those dates and those locations from you, and when I post this, make sure that anybody listening, if they're in that area, they can find the.
Oh, great!
Definitely spread the word a little bit.
I think the website. I think you can, if you just Google "Make Comedy Great Again" tour.
Okay.
It'll pop up. And they're already getting calls for the in the Midwest. Are already starting to call the booker. So it looks like we're gonna have a tour next year also. We might go through, might be a whole national tour.
That's great. Hopefully
Very
it'll come
excited.
down my way so I can check out the show. I know you and Jeff Allen are good buddies.
He's one of those guys who I always had great, admiration for him. He made that choice to make the transition from being a road act to, making the choice to work clean and putting himself out for churches and corporates and all that kind of stuff. And he's just wonderful,
Yeah, he's, as far as economy of words and power of the punchline, he's one of the best.
I saw him do an hour and a half. He let me come out and open for him because I was, I wanted to do some churches, right? And so it was a church over in the middle of Pennsylvania, and he let me come over and open for him. And because I wanted to get the feel of, can I do what I do in a church? That was the question. Mm-hmm. And I did like my 20-25 minutes, and then I sat back and watched him. And he might have been an hour and 45 minutes with an intermission.
Uh-huh.
So we did like 45 minutes, took a break, comes back, does like 20-25 minutes, and then his show segued into his spiritual witness, his Christian witness. And it just knocked my socks off. He was tremendous. Just tremendous.
That's great.
So,
well, definitely link to those shows with him and you and the other two, and hopefully a few people listening will check those out. I know they can go to your website to check out you, and that is rossbennett.com. It's 2 S's in Ross.
Yeah, that's me.
2 N's and 2 T's. I'll link to that in the show notes.
2 S's, 2 N's, and 2 T's.
That's right. You got them covered. Man, it's been great talking to you today, Ross. I appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy. And also people that are up in the New York area, Ross does teach classes. You want to talk about how they can find out more about that? Is that just on your website as well?
It is on the website. It's the Manhattan Comedy School. And I teach a 6-week comedy writing boot camp. But you have to be in the city. You have to be able to be in the city.
That's great.
Very exciting.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Ross. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Be well, my friend.
You too.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation with the very thoughtful, intelligent, and funny Ross Bennett. Again, rossbennett.com. That's RossBennett.com. You can find out more about that Make Comedy Great Again tour he's on with Jeff Allen and a couple other funny folks there. Hopefully you'll be in an area where you can go out and check out Ross, see him in action. He's like a surgeon with his comedy, and it's really fun to watch, even more fun just to listen to and have fun as a night out on the town. So go check out Ross Bennett. Thanks again to Gina DiMaggio for sponsoring the podcast. Thanks to the Hot Breath Podcast, Joel Byers for sponsoring us as well. And again, if you want to join Club 52, find out more how you can get a weekly email to help you get better at your comedy. It's you can get that as low as $7 a month sponsoring the podcast. And we'd love to have you jump on board. And, if you got New Year's resolutions coming up, this might be a good one. Go ahead and start early so that you're doing something already on the 1st of January. I'll talk to you again on the 15th. This is Rick Roberts signing off. Stay funny, stay safe, and stay away from that bag of Halloween candy. Goodness. Oh. All right. I'll be all right. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.